Welcome back to the Success Blueprint podcast. I'm with my business partner, Jason Grider, and my good friend, Chad Kirby. Chad is an awesome guy, and he has his own podcast that you need to check out at Speak and Get What You Want. And he also is the author of a book of Speak and Get What You Want.
Yeah.
So, Chad, welcome.
Well, it's great to be here. It's great to be with both of you. I love your podcast, The Success Blueprint, because I think it's proven that there are certain things you do that will give you that success, and learning the blueprint from experts like you. It's awesome.
And you are, I've told you this before, but you are the one that kind of inspired me and encouraged me and mentored me to get this thing going. So I appreciate you for that.
Well, absolutely. And when you spend time with you, Morgan and Jason, it's like you have incredible wisdom, knowledge, and you're not just great people, but you know so much. And I just know that there are people out there in the real estate market that are just really thirsting to be better. And when you two have the knowledge to help people get better, that's why I'm like, you've got to do the podcast. You got to help people learn.
I love the idea of Success Blueprint just because there's so many different avenues and ways to become successful, but there's a lot of similarities and a lot of things that have to be done. And so bringing people on from different aspects it's life-changing for us too. So it's pretty fun to hear from people like you. So we're excited to have you here today because we know what you've done, and we know you came to our team meeting, last week, right? And everybody walked away with, how can we get more of him? How can we get more of that into our team? So we appreciate that.
Well, absolutely. And I appreciate the fact that you two are willing to share what you have with other people. Because, a lot of people just sit back and they get frustrated because they're like, why am I not more successful? Why? And what's challenging is for two people like you, okay, and I'll just call it out, is the two of you are like Michael Jordans when it comes to real estate. Okay, you have like you're the Michael Jordan. But what does Michael Jordan struggle with? Michael Jordan struggles communicating that message to other people, right? So when Michael Jordan sits back and someone says, "Coach me, Michael," and Michael's like, "Well, just score." And they're like, "Yeah, well, what if there are three defenders there? Go over them or around them, right?" That's
Exactly.
what Michael Jordan does, right? And so people, it's hard for them to really understand what exactly they need to do. But what's brilliant about the two of you is you've been able to sit back and go, okay, yeah, we are the Michael Jordans of real estate, but we want to teach people how to get around and through those defenders so they can be successful. And so people sit back, they listen to your podcast, and they're like, okay, that's what I need to do so that I can go and be like Jason and Morgan.
I appreciate that. No, that's awesome. And that's what I've learned that kind of excites me and motivates me is to really help others.
Totally.
And when the others really want to learn and become more and do more, it's amazing. And I think Jason would agree that if you don't share it, then you start to lose it. And so it's important that you give away or give back or whatever, but the others have to receive and want to receive too.
Oh, for sure. But we talk about in the book that, everyone's favorite subjects themselves, right?
Of course.
And Morgan, when you and I first start chatting, the way you talked about Jason and wanting Jason to be super successful. Well, you're a team, right? So you're both going to benefit from that success, but you were all about Jason being successful, and it wasn't you sitting back going, oh, I want to be successful. I want others to be successful. You want Jason to be successful. And Jason, I'm sure, would say the same about you. So as people enter into the real estate market and people think about investing, if you take that mentality that the two of you have and go, okay, how do I make other people successful? It's amazing what happens because of it.
So Chad, let's go back. We don't have to go back to the beginning, but let's go as far as back as you want. When you started doing Speak and Get What You Want, when you started learning about these things and your brain started coming together with all these thoughts and ideas, when was that? Like where does this start?
Probably 20 years ago, maybe a little more, but I had the opportunity to really spend time with some, people I really admire. I had time to spend time with, Simon Sinek, Dave Ramsey, Ryan Dice and others. And I was really watching them closely as they interacted with people, not just from stage. I had the opportunity to speak from stage with those individuals, but also learning and watching them interact outside of that. Okay. And it really impacted me. And I thought, okay, these individuals are all about trying to help other people be successful. Simon Sinek is all about other people, and that's what draws them to, people are drawn to him because of it. And so sometimes we sit back and we're like, I want everyone to know how successful I am. Right. But that's not the case. So for years I had the opportunity to just be taught by really incredible people and other people that you wouldn't know, but still had a tremendous impact on me. And so I started gathering all that information and putting it together in a consumable way and wrote the book and have the podcast.
So to be on the stages and get to know those people, obviously you had done pretty well yourself to be in those rooms. So what was it that led to that?
I was fortunate to have some success personally that gave me the opportunity to be around those individuals. And so I was teaching others how to be successful. And it drove me to those opportunities, and it was phenomenal. It was great. I feel very blessed. But at the same time, even during successful times, you still have to be in that learning mode, always learning. And that's what you two are always doing as well. You're always learning from other people. And that's what truly, and TK is the co-author of this book with me, and TK does that all the time. We were sitting down at dinner last night, and he was talking about certain mentors he has in Arizona. That he's now, TK spends most of his time now in the multifamily, building and buying apartment buildings, and so he's gone out and found individuals that he's found super successful in those areas. Okay. And finding those mentors.
Oh, that's great. So how did your relationship start with TK?
Well, TK, I was speaking and TK came up to me and he's like, okay, I need you. So at the time I was head of sales for a software company. This was many, many years ago. And I was just teaching some of the things that I had learned. And TK heard me and he came up to me and he goes, okay, that works. And so what actually really happened is he heard me speak and he applied some of the things that I had been talking about. And he came up to me the following time he saw me and he said, I can't believe it. I did exactly what you said and I closed business, and he's like, this is crazy. And I was like, what? And he goes, I need to know more. Tell me more, And so I was like, well,
how can I refine this?
Yeah.
Essentially?
And so I had to make it consumable. And so then TK and I started working together. We got really close, and we went out and started teaching it to other people, and wrote the book, and been busy with it ever since. But the reality is this: we don't teach for the sake of teaching. Like, for example, when TK and I were talking at dinner last night, we're talking about these principles in this book that are helping him close this $80 million apartment building, he's had some hiccups along the way. And he's like, look, I just go back to the book and what we've talked about in the book. And I'm like, really? I'm applying those so that we can get this deal done.
That's awesome. So has he always been in the real estate area?
No, TK started in the construction business. So I guess to an extent, but it was more restoration.
Okay.
And so as we were looking at different businesses, and so we've worked together in different businesses, not just real estate, and we've just applied these principles, and it comes down, when you talk about the blueprint of success, it really comes down to the blueprint of communication and messaging and how you can do that, right? Yeah. And so TK was gone. I was down out of state, in the same state TK was, and he was in a different state. And I was like, why were you in a different state? And he's like, because that $80 million building, I had to, there's some, additional expenses that I didn't, see coming. So I've got to renegotiate the purchase price, and significantly.
Okay.
And so, and you know how this works, the lender has got to go through committee and all these different stuff. So TK goes, so he found the person that he thought would be most impactful to get this push through committee, right? So he reaches out to that individual. Now, that's the thing. You can reach out to anybody, right? We put limitations on ourselves. And the reality is the only limitations we have are the ones we put on ourselves.
Yeah.
And so TK just doesn't have those limitations. And so he sits down and he's like, oh, that's a very important person who's going to be on that committee. I need to talk to them. So he calls them and says, hey, I'm actually going to be in town. I'd love to do breakfast with you. What day could we do breakfast? And he's like, well, I could do breakfast on Tuesday. Are you in town on Tuesday? Yeah. And so then he got on, and he booked his flight. Monday night, he flew out. Tuesday, there he was at breakfast. And he had a great, now the key was at that breakfast, he applied what we talk about, made it all about that individual. And now he has a raving fan sitting on that committee going, okay, we got to make this happen. Yeah.
Wow. That's pretty awesome. So tell me about your podcast. Tell me just briefly about that and what your focus is there.
Well, the podcast, in essence, and we've talked about this before, success really comes down to how you're communicating. Okay. So how you're communicating will determine your success. So let's start first about how you're communicating to yourself. And that's a key part, especially, people in real estate, individuals in real estate. Well, whether you're in the residential market or whatever market you might be in, or even if you're looking for investments, or the way you're talking to yourself about how you're approaching the situation. I mean, we get told no a lot, but for some reason, as we grow older, we start taking it personally. Right? Like when you were a kid and you went to grab a cookie right before dinner and your mom turned to you and said, hey, you don't get that cookie. It's time. We're going to be eating dinner. You're like, oh, okay. And you put down the cookie and you just went back, right? You didn't I'm such a failure. I can't believe
I can't have a cookie.
I can't believe I even tried getting that cookie. Right? And so, but for some reason now as adults, when we're in the real estate business and you're asking for something and someone says no, and you're like, oh, I feel so dumb. I shouldn't have asked for that.
Right.
Right. But no, you just let it go and you keep moving forward. Right. And so in the podcast, we talk about how you communicate to yourself and to others so that you can achieve that level of success. And as we've talked about before, everyone's living below their potential.
Absolutely.
And it's because they put limitations on themselves. And why do they put limitations on themselves? Because they don't want to be disappointed.
Yep. They're afraid of failure.
Yeah, they're afraid of failure. They're like, how's this going to make me look? I don't want to put myself out there. You just put yourself out there. And who cares? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, you just have to have that mentality and talk to yourself through those things. And if you can get your verbiage or the wording to yourself corrected, it changes everything.
That's awesome. I love how communication, just the power of words.
Well, for sure.
We had someone come on our podcast, and she had talked about she was in not a great situation, and she just wouldn't let her define that. So she just started saying what did she say to herself? She said, "This is going to define my life, or I'm going to be a happy person.
I refuse to live a sad life."
There you go. And she said that to herself every day, and she's one of the happiest people I've ever met.
Right? It's true. I tell myself every day, I create my future. I create my future, right? And so you have the opportunity to be whatever you want to be, right? So when I was 16 years old or 15 years old, my dad went on a business trip and never returned, right? He just peaced out. And so he was a great example for me because I was like, I'm not going to be him. And so it's motivated me to try and be the best dad possible, right? Because I'm not him. And so you sit back and you can be whatever you want to be. You can't let, so many people get beat up in business,
right?
In the world. You get beat up, but the reality is,
right?
Yeah,
to everybody.
For sure. But you can't believe in it. You can't buy into that. You just have to go, no, this is who I am. I'm destined for greatness, and this is what I'm going to do.
What's some of the times that you've been told no that you've been able to move past it? I know you've got good stories. If there's one thing about Chad, so what is like one of them that you've been told no, or not going to happen, or kicked down, or something like that?
Like beyond like proposing to my wife? Okay, so
let's. She turn you down?
No. Okay, let's back up for a second. one time, I can think of one time off the top of my head that goes back years when we needed an investment for a business we were doing. And we needed like $500,000 from this individual. But in my mind, I was like, but we could really use $750, right? So I went into the room, and the individuals I was with, he's like, look, we need $500,000. We got to get $500,000 from these guys. And I'm like, okay. So we go in, and we've talked through some things, and I'm like, look, so that's why we need $750,000. And the guy with me, he's like, I'm like, dude, just look straight, okay? Because he was like, I'm like, come on, man.
I thought it was $1 million.
No, I know, right? And but then they said no, right? But we walked out of there with $600,000.
Wow.
And so, but the reality is, he said no, but I was determined. And by the way, when he said no to 750, I wasn't like, oh my goodness, I'm such a failure. Yeah. I was like, okay, how are we going to make this work? How are we going to make this work? Because nobody really, we think in our minds, we think everyone's got it all figured out.
Right.
True.
Right, we're like, oh, they have it figured out. So when someone tells us no, we're like, oh, that smart person just told me no, I must be dumb, right? And then it causes us to step back. And so, yeah, I've been told no a lot. I've been told no a lot. But the reality is have confidence in knowing that, okay, it doesn't matter how we take everything personally. It's not personal. Yeah. You know, we just want to help this individual, and this is what's going to cost. We too often discount ourselves, right? True. So let me give you another quick example. So my wife, we needed to get our daughter. Her daughter was driving an older 4Runner, and she needed new tires. And so I just kept putting it off, right? Because I'm like, oh, they're going to be so expensive because they were big tires, right? I'm like, it'd be so expensive. My wife said, hey, they're having a sale. Buy 2 tires, get 2 free, right? You need to go take the 4Runner down and get tires. I'm like, this would be $1,000. You know, I in my mind, I was thinking maybe $1,200. Because when you buy 2, get 2 free, it just means we're going to really charge a lot more
price for those 2.
For the first 2 to get the other 2 free, right?
Right.
So I go in, and I'm thinking in my mind, it's going to be like $1,200. And the guy looks at me, and he goes, okay, it's going to be $1,050. And I was like, okay. I mean, in my mind, I was like, okay, it was a little less, but it's about what I was thinking. And he goes, okay. Starts typing on the computer. Okay, listen. I can do it for $820. And I was like, $820? And he goes, and then he keeps typing, and he's like, I can do it for $710, but I'm not taking anything less. And I was like, dude, I'm just really enjoying you negotiating, because I was willing to pay the $1,000, right? But you're doing such a good job negotiating against yourself. I'm just going to sit here quiet and thinking that maybe I'll get them for free, right? Yeah. And so he gets down, he's like, $710, that's fine. And I was like, oh, okay. I'll do it. And he's like, can't believe this. And he was like so irritated. And I was like, buddy, but you know what? But we do that to ourselves all the time. We discount ourselves so quickly. And he was looking, I was just in my mind doing the math going, interesting. $1,000, you know, whatever. Right. Yeah. But he was like, okay, he doesn't like the price, you know, and then he lowered it. And I was like, in my mind, I was like, whoa, that was a fast discount, right? But he was thinking, oh, that's not good enough for him. So he kept going down, right? And we say those things in our mind all the time, discounting ourselves. Oh, wow, that person sold real estate for so much longer than me. True. I'm less than. No, you're not. And you just got to quit communicating to yourself that way. And all the most successful people I know have the ability to get rid of that. In fact, there was a study where they studied the top 20 most successful tennis players. And they're like, what separates the top 5 from the top 20? Yeah. Right? And so it was like, what's the difference? Yeah. So they studied the nutrition was the same. The coaching was the same. You know, they were doing all the same stuff. And they're like, okay, then why the top 5? Why are they so much better than the rest of the 20? And you know what it came down to? The top 5 had the ability to quit thinking about their mistakes. Okay, so they had a bad serve. They had a bad serve, and they go, okay, I'm nailing the next one. And they'd immediately go on to the next one.
Yeah.
Where number 15, 17, 18 would go like, I can't believe I messed up that serve. If I would have just done this, I wouldn't have messed up that serve, right?
Yeah.
So how
Don't mess up again.
quickly can you, how quickly can you move on?
The short-term memory.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
exactly right.
I think that's every sport, right? And in business, everything. It's
Exactly.
It's amazing. Yeah, I like that. So what? So doing that, so you have this background. Speaking and the words you use is so important. And so now you're working primarily with law firms.
Yeah, I work with a lot of law firms. I work with several different businesses outside of law firms, but mostly law firms.
Okay.
And law firms are not. What's interesting is when I went and spoke to a group of law firms, and TK came with me. Okay, and TK was a little nervous because a lot of these lawyers that were there had graduated from Harvard and Michigan, these big time law firms, and TK's like, dude, I barely got through high school, right? And he's sitting there, and he's like, I don't know what to say to these guys because they're so much smarter than me. Isn't that interesting?
Right.
Like he's saying to himself, I don't know what I'm going to bring to the table. I'm like, TK, come with me. Right.
Wow.
And so I'm consulting his restoration company at the time, but I'm also working with law firms, and he's sitting there going, and within the first day, he goes, wait a second. These guys have the same problems I got. Right. and then they start turning to him and going, okay, wait, how do I solve this problem? And TK goes, well, you need to do this, this, and this. And they're like, oh my goodness, you're a genius, right?
Yeah.
And it's regardless of what industry you're in, whether it's real estate, whether it's the legal space, whether it's construction, whatever it is, it's the same, very similar challenges that people are facing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's fun to go in there and just make very small changes. I mean, one of the big challenges a lot of businesses have is recruiting the right people.
Yeah.
And so they're like,
Doesn't sound familiar.
yeah, we got to recruit the right people. Well, the problem that most businesses have with recruiting the right people is they don't have the right message, and they're not putting the right message out there, right?
Yep.
And so people, as we've talked about, everyone's favorite subjects themselves, they have to be able to easily see how they win by joining your organization. And if they can see how they win, you'll have tremendous loyalty.
That's interesting. Yeah, a lot of times people can't see that themselves.
Right.
They don't show it in themselves, and really, it's them who's going to be successful if they make that decision. You're just the guardrails. You're just, hey, here's this path. Here's the steps you need to take, but they've got to do it.
They do.
But yeah, I think once they believe it is when it actually happens.
That's what I tell a lot of people when they join our team is we're just a vehicle to help you.
Yep.
And we are just, I compare it to the guardrails too, and bowling. I'm like, we're just the bumpers. You're going to bump
Yeah.
from side to
Right.
side to side
Right.
till hopefully you hit the end, and whether that's a closed transaction or your version of success. But
Yeah.
you're doing the work, you're doing the motion, you're doing the things that need to be successful. We're just there to try to keep you in line so that you don't make as many mistakes as what we did.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's why joining your team is so important, because you guys give them that opportunity. Because so many times people will say, why am I not successful? So they keep going up there, and to use your metaphor, they keep rolling gutter balls, right? And they're
Right.
just like, what the heck? What the heck? And it's like, it's not that you're bad. It's not that you're terrible. You just don't have the right support system around you. And that's why your team and your support system gives them that stability so they can go be successful. So everyone listening to the podcast right now needs to be thinking to themselves, what type of support system do I have
Right.
to really help me get where I need to be? I promise you, nobody does it by themselves. Nobody does. And they think to themselves, oh, that realtor's amazing. They're so good at investing. Okay, but they have a support system
Yeah.
that gets them there.
When you talk about that too, I think another thing is mindset. Back to what you were just saying, is that short-term memory. The what do you think you could achieve if you didn't think you could fail? That sort of thing. I've talked to a lot of agents also that just think that success just happens, right? Or I
got
just
lucky.
show up, or I throw on a collared shirt and I go to work and it just happens, or Jason's just lucky, you know, or Chad's just lucky. What do you, I guess, how do you shift somebody's mindset to get away from that?
If someone really is interested in upgrading their mindset, they have to upgrade the people they're around. They have to. So they'll say, I'm gonna improve my mindset. I'm gonna go read these books. I'm gonna go listen to this podcast. I'm gonna go do all these things, and then they keep hanging out with the same people, right? And then it's like, well, whatever you're reading, you're undoing. You're getting on the escalator that's going the wrong way. And you keep walking and you're like, I'm reading books. I'm listening to podcasts. You should see all the hours I've logged on YouTube. Look at all these shorts I'm watching every day, right? And they've got all that. But then they spend all their time hanging out with people that don't share that type of mentality. And that's why if someone were to ask me, what's the greatest blessing about joining your team? I'd say the opportunity to spend time with the two of you. That's one of the greatest blessings, because you are, and I know everyone knows this, but you are the sum total of the 5 people you spend your most time with. You truly are. And so for me, even my wife, you talk about mindset, I'm talking about the way you communicate to yourself all the time, right? I'm teaching about these things, but yet sometimes I fall into that trap, right? So one day I was frustrated at one of our businesses that we're working on. It just wasn't moving fast enough. And I came upstairs and I said, oh, and Cassie goes, what's the matter? I said, our business is not moving fast enough. This business is not moving fast enough. And she turned to me and she goes, hey, say it one more time and it'll become a reality.
Wow.
And I started laughing.
Look at that. She's listened.
Yeah, but I started laughing and she goes, why is that funny? I'm like, because you're right? I was coming up saying our business is not moving fast enough. Our business, and this business wasn't moving fast enough. And Cassie's like, you need to quit saying that, right? So if I'd have gone upstairs and Cassie would have been like, you're right, that's ridiculous, that's awful, who's not carrying their weight, you know what I mean? But what she was saying is, you got to change what you're saying. Well, I just taught that in a podcast, an hour ago, right? But it's but you have to surround yourself with the right people. And so people are so hesitant to do that because people that think small are so easy to hang out with, right? True. Because it's like, oh, I feel better about my mediocrity because you're all mediocre, right? But then when you hang out with Jason and Morgans of the world, you're going, oh man, I gotta stretch harder, I gotta push harder, right? Well, that's kind of uncomfortable. I'd rather hang out with this guy over here who just makes me
so true.
It makes me feel good about watching YouTube.
We had an agent once tell us, he said, hey, I'm making more money than my friends. Well, good, because you're not making very much money. And so, but he couldn't get out of that mindset, right? And he could have been a great agent and may still be eventually, right? But he just couldn't get that out of his head. So obviously you're on the other spectrum. Like obviously you have times when you doubt or when you're struggling with that, like everyone. But what do you attribute the 5 people, or what do you attribute to you being able to stay positive and stay, I guess, removing those limiting beliefs?
Okay, first you do have to be aware of it. Okay, so they did another survey they studied the top 700 most successful CEOs in America, okay? And they figured out what's the one characteristic they have all in common, the top characteristic. Right. And so in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, hard work. They got up at 4 a.m. or whatever, or they, what schooling did they go to? Or even who are they associating with? But they realized the number one characteristic, self-awareness. Self-awareness. So they sat back and go, okay, I'm self-aware, right? Where you understood, okay, I needed to say this at the right time. I needed to bring in these people. I needed to actually bring in a coach, right? I needed a coach to help me. That's being self-aware. People that have coaches are self-aware because they're like, okay, I know I got some blind spots. I need to bring in a coach and help. And so many people are like, well, I don't want to bring in a coach. No, you have to have those types of mentors. And so the very first thing I would say is you first have to be self-aware. You got to be self-aware and go, okay, wait a second. Those limiting beliefs are creeping in right now. I can feel that, right? And we all do. We all know when you start getting discouraged. Then you have to realize, okay, who do I turn to at that time? So step number one is be aware of those limiting beliefs. Step number two is who then can you hang out with that can get them gone for you? You know, and for me, TK and I all the time, we're always calling each other, building each other up, strength,
awesome.
you know, helping each other get rid of those limiting beliefs. And so you have to recognize it and then go spend time with people that'll help you break those limiting beliefs. That's key. You know, I sat down and by the way, yesterday I sat down with my, had lunch with my nephew, Hiram. Hiram Bourne, he's a phenomenal kid, okay? And he's 23 years old. At least, I think he's 23.
Around 23.
Yeah, he's 23. It's outranged. When you get my age, it's ranges, you know? He's in between 22 and 24. Anyway, incredibly successful. Incredibly successful. Selling life insurance over the phone.
Wow.
Selling life insurance over the phone and making incredible amounts of money. And I sit there and I was like, Hiram, okay, tell me what the key. So whenever I'm sitting here and he's 23, I'm 52. I held this kid as a baby, you know what I mean? Yeah. But I'm sitting here and I'm going, okay, what can I learn from you? I'm always looking to go, who can I learn from? What can I learn from? Hiram, what can I learn from you? And his number one thing he was talking about was those limiting beliefs. And who's he associating with? Right. And he's very selective in the people that he's associating with. And what I would say as a young kid, you know, that's tremendous self-awareness.
Absolutely.
Where he's like always trying to be, okay, I want to associate with that person. I want to associate with that person. Because you think about kid's 23, right. He could be associating with people that their greatest goal is, you know.
Or he could give himself excuses.
100%.
Like 100%. I'm doing good for my age, or I'm young for my age, and that's why this.
Right? Yeah, that's exactly right. And so for him, he was telling me, I said, well, he was playing football at Snow College, and he tore his hamstring. And they showed him the rehab that he had to do. And he said, frankly, I'm not that passionate about football to do this rehab. Yeah. He was incredibly gifted. You know, he's just an all-star college scholarships. You know, he could have gone to the Air Force Academy, Naval Academy, all these things. He chose to go to Snow College. And but he realized, I'm not that passionate about this, right? But then he found out what he was most passionate about. And people will say, oh, so he's really passionate about life insurance?
Right.
No, you know what he's passionate about? Helping people be successful. Helping people be successful. And that's what he is. And so all of his time and devotion is like, I'm trying to help these kids be successful, his team be successful. And so I told him, I said, look, Hiram, you should spend more time doing this or that. And he's like, no, I'm going to spend time figuring out how to make every member of my team be successful.
Wow.
He's like, I don't get excited about me being the only one that has the wealth.
Yeah.
Lonely at the top.
Right. Right. Yeah. And, and we got he just got a new Audi R8 and we got in that. And I was like, brother, you're a little too young to have this much speed. It's like, we're going 100 on the freeway.
You're not appreciating this like you should.
I'm like, well, no, he appreciates it. He 100%, he's well beyond his years. He appreciates it. I'm like, this is really a fast car.
There was I talked to Jason about this. There was this agent back in the day, like it was probably 12 years ago, and I was not selling any real estate. I mean, very few transactions a year. And he had no limiting beliefs, this guy. And I didn't respect a lot of the things and qualities this person had, besides the fact that he just didn't think he could fail. Mm-hmm. And so where my self-awareness comes in, as I remember him coming through the doors of the office and somebody saying, can you believe that this person made this incredible amount of money? And in my head, I thought, yeah, I could do that, and I was not making any money. But then my self-awareness or the voice in your head's like, but you're not this guy's mopping the floor with you.
Yeah.
And so that was one of those defining moments in my
Right?
life that
Right?
of a conversation I had with myself of like, what does he, or, you know, what do they have? And it was like, well, the one quality that every successful person that you're saying is those limiting beliefs, that you can keep them in check and have the
Right.
self-awareness to say, well, if I let this control myself, then, and anyway.
That's right. So true. And Hiram's younger brother, he made like 40 grand that month or last month. And that's pretty good, you know, for a 22-year-old. And I was like, wow. And he goes, well, I knew once he got his limiting beliefs worked through, he was going to be great. Right.
Wow.
And so
Yeah.
I was like, that's incredible. Like that opportunity to really understand, okay, it's all, the limitations are all what you put on yourself. And I know, so we talk a lot about, you're like, Chad, you're a communications expert, you're a revenue growth expert. That's what you do. Well, it's all really coming down to messaging and communication. And before you even communicate outward, you got to fix what you're communicating inward, because you're always communicating, right? You're always communicating all the time. And when people say what's more believable, nonverbal or verbal communication, it's nonverbal, right? I mean, I remember when my kids were really small, Chase or Chandler, one of them, they were all small at one point, but one of my twins came up to me and they said, Dad, are you okay? I said, yeah, I'm very happy. And they're like, could you like tell your face, like you need to talk to your, you know what I mean? I'm like, what do you mean? And they're like, you don't look very happy, right? And we all know that nonverbal communication, we're always communicating. You know, when I was a kid, and I don't know if you two had this experience, you called home and asked mom if you could do something. You knew by the way mom said hello, whether it was okay to ask her to extend curfew or whatever you ask.
Never mind.
And mom answers the phone, hello.
I'll be home soon.
Yeah, right. Or hello. You're like, oh, there's a chance, you know. And it just comes down to that nonverbal communication. And so you're always communicating. And so when people walk up to a home, and when you're dealing in real estate or you're approaching an investment, whatever it is, you're communicating the entire way as you walk up to that home, as you walk up to that opportunity. You're always communicating.
I love that.
Wow, that's awesome. So how, I know obviously you're communicating to yourself. You want to spend your time with the, best people so that you can get out of that. How do you change that to become more purposeful in finding those people? I mean, so many people I just go home and, my neighbors or my friends or whatever, they're just my friends and that's who I hang out with. So how do you change that, shift that mindset?
It starts with your intentionality. It starts with you having clarity on what you want to do, right? Okay. So what do you want to do? You have to set out and say, you know what? I'm selling this much real estate this year. And I don't know how yet, but this is where I'm going, right? Get clear in that destination. And then once you're clear in your destination, then the people that you need around you will start to show themselves. You'll start finding them because you know what you're looking for, right? Yeah. And I'm sure I'm slandering this, but it's called like the Baderhoff principle or something. Somebody's like, he just slandered that. But where you buy a color of a car that nobody else, and then all of a sudden you see it everywhere, right? Opportunities like that, the people that will help you get where you need to be, they're everywhere. But if you don't know where you want to be, then it doesn't matter because you're not even sure what you're looking for. But if you're saying to yourself, I'm going to sell this much real estate this year, right? And I need the people around me that are going to help support me. The first thing is they join your team. Okay. Yeah. They come to your team and you have this system. They have the two of you and others to help get you there. But then they sit back and go, okay, what in my personal network, you know what? I don't, and I'm not saying that we go through a whole selective process and we're like, sorry, we're no longer friends. You're dead to me. You're dead to me. Right. We don't do that. I'm not saying that, but you will naturally start gravitating towards people that are going to help you get where you need to be because you know where you need to be.
Just evolving.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It just evolves.
So when I years ago, I taught high school. I was a high school teacher, and I decided to quit high school to start selling insurance. That was my first selling gig, right? Then, by the way, it's the best, and you get your teeth kicked in quite a bit, right? But
Of course.
right. So I was selling insurance, and I sold my wife on letting me quit high school. Not that she was saying you have to stay, but I just said, hey, listen, I'm gonna quit teaching high school. And she's like, why is that? And I'm like, let me tell you why. I'm going to build this massive business. We're going to have so much money. We're going to have freedom. And so I started laying everything out, right? Yeah. And Cassie was like, I'm in. I'm sold. I'm there. I'm like, all right, let's go. Let's do this. Well, the next month after I quit, she comes into me and she goes, hey, I decided I want to go to New York City and see the Rachel Ray show. Rachel Ray was a daily talk show years ago. And she goes, I want to go to New York City. I want to see the Rachel Ray show. And I was like, we can't do that. She's like, well, no, now that you're not teaching anymore, we've got all this extra money. I said, oh, no, we're not going to have money for years, right? We're going to be we're going to be poor for years, right? She's like, whoa, that's not what you told me.
That's not the dream.
And she goes, I want to go to New York. I want to see the Rachel Ray show. And I'm like, yeah, no. That's not going to happen anytime soon. So let me just squash that dream real quick, right? Well, we didn't talk about it for a few weeks, and I came in from work one day, and she goes, hey, we need to talk. And I said, well, about what? And she goes, well, you need to sit down. And I was like, oh, well, this isn't good, right? And she goes, I was on Rachel Ray's website, and there was a question that said, do you have embarrassing parents? And I said, I don't, but my children do. And I told them about you. And I was like, wow. Where are you going with this? And she goes, well, next week they're flying out Valerie Bertinelli, she's a host. Valerie Bertinelli. She was married to Eddie Van Halen. They're flying her out next week to film you as the world's most embarrassing father. And we're going to be the world's most embarrassing parents. I was like, I'm not doing this. She goes, no, they're paying our entire trip to New York City, and we are going to be guests on their show. I was like, I'm not doing that. She said, don't mess with my trip to New York City, right? And so there we were. We flew out to New York City. We were met with a limo at the airport with Kirby sign. We went and we were guests on the Rachel Ray show. We were there with Selena Gomez and Tim McGraw, and we were just, it was, and there we were, and they gave us cash for being there. And she's like, so we had no money. But Cassie's like, no, I'm clear. We're going to New York City. Now, she said, I want to see the Rachel Ray show, but we ended up guests sitting front and center on the Rachel Ray show. But the reality is,
I want to see this episode.
No, you don't. It's awful. I got more hair there. But the point is, she was clear in where she was going, so things aligned to help get her there. Right. And so many agents, and I don't mean to pick on agents, but I'm just going to, for just a moment here, so many agents come to the table and say, I want to have this much success this year.
Yeah.
Do you? Yeah, I think so. I want to try for that. No, you speak definitively. And that goes back to the way you're speaking. No, this is what we're going to do. This is how, and it doesn't, no, like, you think my wife sat back and said, I think I'm going to be a guest on the Rachel Ray show. No, she just said, I'm going to New York and I'm going to see Rachel Ray. I'm not sure how that's happening right now, but I'm going to go work and figure it out. And when agents get clear on that, the supporting cast shows up.
You used a word once, last week or whatever, that said declaration. Making that declaration. I just thought that I wrote that down in bold. I remember just thinking that's so important to have that, because it's different than just saying I want it, or this is my dream, or this is my goal.
Right.
I think when you're making a declaration, it just changes it a little bit.
That's exactly right. Yeah, you declare things, it changes. And everyone's afraid to declare. Yeah, everyone's afraid because everyone's like, I don't want to put myself out there. You know, I don't want to do that, but it's game changing.
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome when you also talk about, declaring something. It's not when you miss it, you hang up all of these excuses around it, right?
Right.
Like we've heard the cliche of burn the ships and things like that. but you literally just burn everything and you say, no matter what, we're going. No matter what, we're going to the Rachel Ray show.
Right.
And she easily could have hung all of these different excuses, or, so often that we're like, oh, well, I came close. That's not really what it was. Or this other important thing came into my life. But when you make something, definitive and declare it, and it is the most important thing to you,
right,
you make it happen.
You do. And I sit back and I go, I'm glad Cassie didn't upgrade her supporting cast. But the point the point is, I was telling her no all the way, all day long. No, this isn't going to happen. But the reality is, she's like, no, I'm clear in my purpose.
Right.
So for people, how do people, that's a big distinction. How do people do that? A lot of people have goals and dreams. This is what I want to do this year. What makes that change to where it's something that I'm going to do it versus, I really want to do that this year?
You have to really decide that that's what you want to do. You have to be okay being uncomfortable, right? Okay. Because everybody ends up setting their temperature at their house, a certain temperature, right? To where they're comfortable.
Of course.
And if you turn it up or you turn it down, you recognize it, right? So you have to decide, I'm going to be intentional and I'm changing the temperature. Everyone makes the amount of money they need to make.
True.
Right? If someone says, I got to make 10 grand a month, they make 10 grand a month. Someone says, I got to make 15 grand, 5 grand, whatever it is, they have to make 25 grand a month, whatever. They make what they have to make, right? But to push yourself beyond that, knowing that, okay, my bills are covered at 8 grand a month, but I'm making 30, I'm making 50, I'm making 100 grand a month, And right. I remember when TK, TK and I were having a very candid conversation one time, and we were going through his goals, and he was outlining his goals, and this is what I'm going to do, and this is how I'm going to do it. And I was like, huh? And he's like, what are yours? And I said, well, I want to make this amount of money a month. I'm going to make this amount of money a month. And he looked at me and he goes, huh, that really get you excited? I'm like, yeah, it gets me excited. Yeah. And he's like, how about we 2.5 times that? And I was like,
wow,
really? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, okay. And so all of a sudden I start thinking bigger, as opposed to someone that's like, whoa, because the number I gave, the number I threw out there, I thought was significant, right? Yeah. And he's like, yeah, I don't think so. And so as we go back to associating with people that are like, okay, I want you to go better. And so that's what people also, when they work with the two of you guys see the best in people. And so you push them a little bit further. And it's not for everybody. I'll tell you, that's not for everybody. Yeah. I said earlier, everyone should come work on your team, but the reality is it's not for everybody. People that are very comfortable saying, I just want to make this amount, then that's great. There's other opportunities out there.
Do you feel like, because you're saying you wanted to make X amount a month, right? So when you push yourself, do you feel like, because if you were just to hit that lower number, or if that was okay for you, I feel like then that's maybe where we fall into status quo or relaxation.
Right.
But when you have something that stretches you, then that's when more things expand, and that's when, your imagination or whatever it may be flows, that then it's not just the extra, bit that you'll make. It's, the growth that's in there and the things that, keep you from just stopping, coasting, all of those things that,
Right. Well, and I love you use the word imagination, because some people will say, oh, you know what, Chad, I'm not that motivated by money. I just need enough. Well, then use your imagination and think to yourself, what could I do to help people? What could I do to help my family? What could I do to, I want to spend a month in Costa Rica, or whatever it is. Be creative and think to yourself, okay, use your imagination. The one thing that I have learned when I come into companies, organizations, is you are either growing or sinking. I don't know why this is the case, but I've never been able to see organizations plateau. I just don't know. Yeah. People will say, I just want my company to do $5 million a year, and then we'll stay there. Just $5 million. Right. But no, you're either declining or growing. You've got to determine to do one or the other.
And we've talked, and I love this saying, only dead fish go with the flow.
Right.
So if you want to coast, and I find myself going and then just kind of, but as soon as you start gliding, I mean, it'll turn into a free fall pretty quick.
Right.
And so you've got to be doing things constantly to keep you moving or going or so.
That's right. So true. So true.
Well, Chad, what would you, so your advice, if you could, Jason, I love this question that he asks our guest. What is something that you teach your kids, and you have an amazing family? What is something that you teach them that you can pass to them that was maybe, say, your success blueprint?
Well, I tell my kids, and I stole this from my father-in-law because he used to say it all the time. You have to strive for excellence. And what I mean by that is, and we've all heard Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, good's the enemy to great, but really striving for excellence. And you sit back and you have to, when you striving is like putting in that effort. Like you need to make the effort. I can't stand the victim mentality. I can't stand it. It's sitting back and you look at like, oh man, they're so successful. They're so lucky, and it's, I just can't stand that. You have to be putting forth the effort. Yeah. Like what type of effort have you made today to get you to where you need to be? And so many people will sit back and go, well, people get busy, okay? People, especially in the sales world, okay? People confuse busyness for progress.
Oh, all the time.
And so they're like, man, I've had a really busy day. Well, if you've done anything that's progressing you towards excellence, and excellence can be the amount of homes you're going to sell, what you're doing intentionally with your family, whatever it is. But what effort have you put into excellence today? Right. And it's not answering emails. It's not YouTube shorts. It's not any of that, right? That's not getting you. Now, I'm not saying listening to podcasts. I got a podcast, right? So yeah. I'm not saying listening to podcasts isn't really important, but that's not pushing you towards those mile markers of success that we're looking for.
So when you say that, it full circles clear around to self-awareness.
Right.
Right?
Absolutely.
So when you mistake movement for achievement.
Yes. Ooh, that's good. Is that on your wall somewhere?
It is. I think
coin that.
Coin that.
But when you do that, when you have the self-awareness, then you can kind of know. Like there was this mentor that Ben Kinney, that's a real estate guy and somebody I've always looked up to, and he always, would say if you had somebody follow you around at work, so my wife and my kids, would you be embarrassed or would you be proud of the way that you worked that day? And so if you need some of that self-awareness, if you can ask yourself these questions that maybe can trigger or help you with some of that. And what I learned was back when my wife I knew would be extremely embarrassed of the way that I was, working and self-motivating myself. When I'd go home, she'd say, "How was work?" And I'd be like, "Oh, it was great." And "How was work?" "Oh, it was great." And then after like 6 months of that, of not making any money, she's like, "Where are you going to work that's so great that's paying you so little?" And so you learn to just say things and be honest and have the self-awareness, and it's easier dialogue to give. That I'll come home, she'll say, "How was work?" And I'll say, I didn't get anything done that's really going to move the needle.
Right.
And when you have too many of those, then they're like, okay, well, where do we need to shift, or what do we need to make happen? Or you could say, hey, I had a great day today. This is, what's going to be awesome,
Right.
And so anyway, I love that it does circle around to that self-awareness that
100%
triggers just really everything.
It really does. Yeah. That's really at the heart of that. And as you recognize it, as you have that self-awareness, then really be mindful of those words you're telling yourself and the words you're saying to other people.
So impactful. I think sometimes we get into that mindset of, hey, you ask somebody how they're doing. What do they say? Oh, good, and move on, right?
Right.
Good, move on. Just because it's easy, it's non-confrontational, but it's not reality.
Right.
And so I think sometimes we get in that with ourselves, right?
100%.
And we get back and we're like, oh yeah, it was good. It was pretty good. And we just kind of get in that cycle of just saying, yeah, we're good, we're fine. But are we honest with ourselves?
And it goes back to being clear on what you're going to accomplish, because then you can say, yeah, today I got closer to where I'm going.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, awesome, man. Well, I
That's
appreciate it. I know that this will be the first of many of having you on as a guest, and I appreciate your friendship and mentorship, and also you're one of those guys that make me better. Every time I'm around you is like, it's just awesome that I know that, I mean, every time I can be around Chad Kirby is a good time.
He's not lying.
And
A few weeks ago, he said, how do we spend more time with Chad? and so, yeah.
You're
so
kind.
thank you.
You're kind.
So I appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's great to be with you. Great to be with you.
All right, thanks, man.
Thank you.
You bet.